G'day, it's Adam here. Welcome back. This is the second part of a two-part interview with Special Forces 2nd Commando Regiment Warrant Officer Nick Hill. If you haven't listened to part A, stop, go back and listen to part A before you listen to part B. I hope you enjoy this second part of this very special podcast. Absolutely, and we'll talk about Brett a little bit later and what happened to Brett and where you were. So we'll bring that in shortly. But whilst you were with the Australian contingent in Egypt in 2008, you suffered a heart attack. What happened, and how did that affect your career?
Yeah, so I went to the Sinai in October 2007, and I was the security sergeant, one of the 4 security sergeants in the Sinai. So the Sinai, or Operation Mazurka for Australia, is the Australian contingent for multinational force and observers. So it's like the UN, but it's not. And it's run out of Rome, not New York, and so forth. So and the role of the MFO was to provide observers between the Israelis and the Egyptians as part of the Camp David Accords in the late 70s. And, you know, my role was one of the security sergeants. There was 4 of us. And we provided security, or ran the security for the North Camp. So we had 2 camps, one in the North, called North Camp, and obviously one in a place called Sharm el-Sheikh, which was known as South Camp. And yeah, we ended up providing, running the security like a guard commander, so to speak. And we did shift work. And yeah, I was just before I rotated back home. So it was in April of 2008. And I remember sitting in the mess hall eating breakfast with the SAS guy who was replacing me. So there was always an SF sergeant in the Sinai as part of the contingent. So I had an SAS guy replacing me. So I was sitting down having breakfast with him, and I just felt like, you know, I got really sweaty and clammy and felt a bit off. And it felt like I was getting really bad heartburn. And I just remember sitting there, oh, you know, I'm really getting sore. And he sort of looked at me. He's like, "You're all right." I said, "Nah, I feel a bit crook." You know, we had a running joke. If you got sick in the Sinai, it was called, you got the Siddiquis. It was just the name that we had for it. Right? So I'm thinking to myself, man, I've been here 6 months and I haven't been sick yet. And 5 days before I'm going home, I get sick. Typical, you know, Murphy's Law, so to speak. So I went back up to my room and I'm like, "Nah, I think I've got to go to the toilet." And I couldn't go to the toilet. And I'm like, "Oh, I just don't feel well." I'll go and lay down. And thank God I never laid down, because I probably would never have got up. And I took myself to the hospital on the base, which was run by Americans at the time. And as I was walking, my opposite number, the other security sergeant that I deployed with, a bloke called Dave Power from 1RA at the time, and he looked at me and he goes, "You all right, mate? God, you look really grey. Are you having a heart attack?" I'm like, "Piss off, mate. Don't be silly." And anyway, so they sent me to the hospital at Beersheba in Israel, and they found a clot in one of the ventricles of my heart. So, you know, I had within half an hour, I was on the table having a stent put in my heart, and I didn't really believe it until I was watching them put the stent in my heart on the ultrasound machine. I'm just like, "Oh shit, you know, this is real." And you know, the cardiologists in Israel basically said, "This is the end of your career. You can't be a soldier like this." And I'm like, "Bullshit, I'm going to prove you wrong." So I was lucky, as part of my deployment to the Sinai, I was getting posted to the Special Forces Training Centre as the senior instructor urban operations at the time. So I was able to come back to Australia and start doing my recovery. So, you know, I went and saw the cardiologists in Australia, and I had some really good doctors at Singleton at the time, and they looked after me, and the career advisor for SF was looking after me, and "Don't worry about it, you'll get back on your feet, blah, blah, blah." And I just trained and I trained and I trained, and I was lucky enough that I could pass all my physical tests. The cardiologist would say to me, "You wouldn't even know you've had a heart attack because you're able to do all this stuff." And that comes to I suppose the mental toughness that people go through and train with, and be part of what we do. It's like I'm not going to continue my career. I'm not going to tell them I can't do this. So I trained, and I got posted back to the regiment as the company sergeant major of Bravo Company and deployed with the boys. So yeah, I wasn't going to allow that to stop my career. And I had people in my unit and my career advisors and so forth helping me along the way. And as long as I could physically do everything, I did it. So yeah, I'm really grateful for it.
Absolutely. And so what year, Nick, did you deploy to Afghanistan, and what were you expecting, and did your experiences in Iraq assist with the challenges that you were facing in Afghanistan, or were they vastly different?
Well, we deployed. My company, B Company, deployed on rotation, SOTG rotation 16. So we were there from July 2011 till February 2012. And Iraq and Afghanistan are like polar apart. They are completely different to each other. Afghanistan, I would equate to the Wild West, and Iraq was all urban operation stuff. Where Afghanistan, we were everywhere, and we spent majority of our time in Afghanistan doing counter-narcotic operations with the Drug Enforcement Agency. The DEA, they had a team called the FAST, which is Foreign Advisory Support Team. And they're the guys that would go into the drug labs and do all the testing on the drugs and, the heroin labs and so forth. And so we spent majority of our time doing narcotics and counter-narcotic operations in Afghanistan. And prior to us deploying on 16, rotation 15, which was Charlie Company, they had started doing the operations with the DEA prior to us arriving. So, we would go into places where nobody would go. So we spent a lot of our time doing counter-narcotic stuff down in Helmand Province. And Helmand Province was a really bad place. They were fanatical down there. And Charlie Company and ourselves, our company, spent a lot of time doing stuff down there. And people just wouldn't go into Helmand to do what we were doing. And, we would, the DEA wouldn't go anywhere unless they had us with them. So we would provide the gunfighter capability for them to keep the Taliban away and the drug guys away from allowing them to do their part. And we had a lot of operations, down in, that was RC or regional RC Southwest, which was run by the Marines. And the Marines would turn off operation. The commander of RC Southwest, which was a Marine general, he would turn off operations just to allow us to do our things in Helmand. And he would just turn assets on to allow us to go and do things, because we'd be so further north than where his Marines were. And we had such a big effect on the battle space that he would just go, whatever you want, you can have it. And that's what would happen, and I can't compare Afghanistan to Iraq. They're completely different, mate, and especially the tasks that in Iraq, I was in the training team, helping Iraqi soldiers, train and do their operations. But in Afghanistan, I was a CSM of Commando Company doing combat operations, doing what we're supposed to be doing, and it just, other than heat wise, there really wasn't much similarity between Iraq and Afghanistan, because the people were different, the way they fought was different, and it was just, a very, very different place, and we did different things. So our missions were different.
So with the missions, obviously you were working alongside the DEA, and did you have much interaction with the Afghan Army on these the special missions? Were they with you, or no? This was all just no.
No, we didn't have Afghan Army. What we had was the Provisional Response Team, or PRC, which was, and every province they had a police counter-terrorism company, that was loosely termed. And now part of our responsibility with training the Afghani security forces was to train the PCRT, Provisional Response Company, or whatever, I can't remember the acronym now. But so when we deployed, we'd have generally a platoon of them coming with us. It was, they were the Afghani face for us. So a lot of times when we went into Helmand province, they're like, we're not in Uruzgan anymore, no shit, Toto. You know what I mean? It was like, and they didn't like it because that's not what they were there for, and unfortunately, there was times that they weren't willing to do anything. I understand that's culturally how things work. And so, yeah, everywhere we went, we had the PCR, those guys with us. And then when we worked with the DEA, they had the NIU, which is the National Interdiction Unit. And they were like, besides the Afghani commandos, and not that I had anything to do with them, but, these guys were brilliant. They were awesome guys. They were well-educated dudes. They came from all over Afghanistan. They just weren't from a province or an area. They came from all over Afghan, and they were really, really well-trained guys. And the NIU were excellent because they were there to make their country a better place. And not saying that the Afghani Army and all that sort of stuff wasn't trying to do that at the time, but these guys were just absolutely professionals, and they were great. They were really good dudes, and they just, were brilliant, really good guys.
So, as any veteran knows, war comes at a price, and two men that you knew died in Afghanistan, and you mentioned the first was Brett Wood, your great mate. Can you tell us about Brett and what made him so inspirational in the unit, and where were you when he was killed, and how did you cope with being part of his ramp service and his funeral?
Yeah. So as I've mentioned before, Brett and I did selection course together, and we're on team a couple of times together. And then, he became one of my team commanders when I was a platoon sergeant on team. And he was just the ultimate professional. He was the soldier's soldier, the commander's commander. He was just brilliant. Like, it's just nothing that guy did was wrong. He was just amazing to watch him work and how he did things and how precise he was about things, and just his whole demeanor, the way he trained his guys, and he was just brilliant. He was amazing guy. And somebody who I had a lot of time for and who I'd known for a long time. I mean, we weren't chum mates, but we were friends, and we would talk all the time, and we'd talk about different things and have different perspectives on things. And some of the guys in the regiment were a lot closer than what he was, but him and I were. But on a professional level, we were really close and mates. And he was just, there's not many people I admire, but I absolutely admired that guy. And he was just everything people aspired to be. So we were in, like I mentioned, Bravo Company, he was in Charlie, Brett was in Charlie, he was a platoon sergeant, Charlie Company. And we were at Kultana in South Australia doing our pre-deployment mission profiles to deploy. And my company commander, we were in the old detention centre at Kultana. We're staying there, that's where we were working out of. And my company commander come and knocked on my door in the middle of the night, and nothing happened. Nothing good happens in the middle of the night, mate, when you get knocked on the door. Knock on the door, and he just come in and said, "Hey, I've got something to tell you." I said, "Yeah, what's that, boss?" He said, "Just let you know that Brett was killed overseas this morning." I was like, "What the fuck?" Like, that dude, what are you talking about? That dude doesn't And it took a long time to just register in your brain that, you know, this had happened. And we got everybody up and told the company what had happened, and it put shockwaves through the company and the regiment. And, you know, like, we took the day off from training that day. We went into town, got on the booze, boys did their thing for Brett. And the next day we got on with it because we had to. We were getting ready to deploy. So a lot of us senior NCOs and warrant officers were sent back to Sydney early, and we were prepared to bring him home. And so, you know, it was an absolute honour to be one of his bearers of his casket for his funeral, and it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done was carry his casket, part of the ramp service, and, you know, also the funeral for him. Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that, Nick, because I know how close he was of a mate and how much you admired what he did. And so you lose Brett, and then whilst in Afghanistan, you knew Corporal Cameron Baird, VC MG. When you hear his name, what is the first memory that comes to your mind of Cam, and the striking picture of Cam with black face paint? And what, after losing Brett, how did you cope with the loss of Cam, and what memory would you like to share about Cam that you believe people should know?
Okay. Yeah, Cameron Baird. He was the bravest man I've met in my life, mate. He was, you know, I was lucky to have Cam serve in the company when I was a CSM. I remember, I'll tell you a couple of stories about Cam. So, and I talked to, you had his dad on a podcast not long ago. So I've told a lot of these stories to Doug, Cam's dad, and Brendan, his brother, and his mother, and that. And so when I was at Special Forces Training, at the Commando Training Wing, Cam was doing his Urban Operations Supervisor course to supervise commando operations. Anyway, we're coming towards the end of our course. You know, the course is like 6 weeks long. So we're coming towards the end of our course, and Cam walks into my office. He was a corporal at the time. Cam walks into my office. He goes, Nick, listen, I need to take Friday off. I'm like, why, Cam? You got your testing coming up on Friday. He goes, oh, you know, I've got to go to Government House. I'm like, what are you going to Government House for, mate? He goes, oh, somebody put me in for a medal of gallantry and I've been putting it off, so I've got to go and get it, you know. And that's how his attitude was towards things. Like, he's like, hey, dude, you just won the 3rd highest gallantry award we have, and you're just blowing it off because he didn't care about that sort of stuff, you know. It's not what he was about at all. So when I became the CSM of Bravo Company, Cam was one of my team commanders in Bravo. And he was, again, like Brett, he was just a absolute professional. And he was somebody a lot of people and most people in the regiment admired, absolutely admired him. You know, he was brave. He was strong. I mean, the guy's like 6'4". He's, you know, built like a brick shithouse, but has a heart of gold. Like, he had a heart of gold, you know. And, you know, when I was the CSM, it was really interesting to talk to him about certain things, you know, get his perspective. You know, the guy had done several tours to Afghanistan, and, you know, he'd been to Iraq during the invasion of Iraq, and we were in Timor together. You know, he was in Charlie Company and I was in Bravo. And, you know, so we come across each other over the years and we talked about different things and so forth. And I remember when we were in Afghanistan, he'd always come out with a different cam job on his face. You know, dudes were running bets on what he'd come out as. You know, whether he'd come out as Paul Stanley out of KISS, or he'd come out as a Punisher, or he'd come out as somebody else, or whatever the case may be. So guys were running bets on who he'd come out with this day. And Cam was the only person in the company who would not paint his weapon. So all of us have painted our weapons to camouflage them. He refused to. And I said to him, like, what are you doing, mate? How come you didn't paint your weapon? He goes, because I want him to see me when I'm shooting at him. And I'm like, oh, okay, mate. And that's how he was. You know, he was I remember talking to him one day, watching him in battle, and like he would like run to the gunfight. Like for example, we were coming out of this operation one day, and we were moving to our LZs to get picked up by the helicopters. And the Taliban had been shooting at us all day. At the beginning, they were giving us a a good fight at the beginning of the day, and then sort of dulled down once they realised how many of us were on the ground and so forth. And so it sort of slowed down. And then, we were withdrawing, so they all become brave again and start shooting at us again. So Cam, company headquarters, we're towards the end of the company as we were withdrawing. His team's probably about 2 teams in front of me at company headquarters. I was what was called CHQ TAC or tactical. It was myself and the company commander and a few signalers and the doctor and JTACs and whatnot. So we had our own team. We're getting shot at, so we turned around to watch the rear team taking care of the guys who were shooting us. And next thing you see Cam sprinting past company headquarters and his team chasing after him so he could get into the gunfight. He'd just stand on the ridgeline just shooting at these people. Nothing scared that guy. He was just amazing to watch, and his boys absolutely admired him, loved him. He would do anything for them. And the last time I spoke to Cam, and I said to Cam when we got back, hey, mate, you're supposed to be the commander. You got to wheel and deal your guys in the battle space and move them around. I said, they're not supposed to be chasing after you in a gunfight, mate. And he goes, yeah, I understand that. But I knew what he was going to do. He was just going to keep doing what he did because that inspired his guys to do what they were doing. He was a from the front commander. He led from the front on every battle he was in, and even when he was killed. So the last time I saw Cam was I decided to get out, and Cam was hadn't deployed with the company in Bravo because he went back with Bravo company. And he was deploying late, so I saw him at the regimental headquarters, and I'm like, what are you doing here? And he's like, oh, I'm deploying late and whatnot. I'm like, well, mate, it's good to see you. Take care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you when you come home. And I was out camping with some friends of mine down in southern New South Wales near Goulburn, and I got a phone call from a really good mate of mine who was a CSM at the time. And he rang me up and he just said, hey, mate, there was very poor reception where we were. He goes, can you give me a call back when you get better reception? I'm like, yeah, mate. So I went up on top of the hill and rang him, and he said, just let you know that Cam was killed this morning. I'm like, Cam Baird? So yeah. And I thought to myself, he went out the way he's supposed to go out, fighting the fight, taking the fight to him, because that was Cam. So anybody who knew Cam knew that that's how that warrior is supposed to die, not as an old man, which would have been better for everybody else because, he had a lot more to give to the regiment and everybody in it and his own family. But he died the warrior's death, taking the battle to him. And then obviously, for his actions that day, he was awarded the Victoria Cross posthumously. And yeah, he's like, the bravest guy I've ever seen in action, the bravest. A lot of brave guys I work with and had the honour to see, but he was definitely the bravest of them all. And it was a sad day when he was killed, but it was, I suppose fitting for that type of person he was, and I've spoken to his mum and dad about it, and, that's how I see him. And anybody who knew him, especially the guys there that day that I talked to about what happened, and, that's exactly how he should have gone. So, yeah, that's Cameron Baird, mate.
It's, from talking to you, Nick, it's like the two standouts are Brett and Cam, like of the regiment, like other guys as well, but those two guys were just two, they're iconic names in, like, you hear them and you know who they are. Like, I know myself, like you hear Brett Wood's name and you know who Brett Wood is, and you hear Cam Baird and you know these guys, like you know what they've done and their story, and to hear it first-hand accounts from veterans like yourself who served with them, mate, it's absolutely just, I'm sitting here just in awe, and like, mate, they're just, I'm lost for words. I'm lost for words, mate.
Yeah, it's some of the, our regiment is full of awesome guys. A lot of them have left now, and a lot, unfortunately, we lost the most amount of guys in Afghanistan, the most amount of wounded, because we're doing the heavy lifting, doing the heavy fighting, and we were doing things that other people wasn't able to do. And, the risks. We all knew the risks, mate. We understood what this is about. If you didn't want it, one of the things I used to say to guys during the selection course was that if you've got an issue with taking the fight to somebody, you shouldn't be here, because there is a chance you're going to die and you are going to take a person's life. It's simple as that. And if you've got a problem with it, you don't be here, because it's something you have to deal with, and you're going to lose mates. You are. And unfortunately, the period of time in Afghanistan when I was there in the regiment, we lost so many of them doing what we were supposed to do, mate, and it's, yeah. But, when you see guys like that, and Todd Langley and Chris Gotch and all the other boys that have been killed and died throughout the years, it's like, it saddens you. But, you're very proud to have known them, who they were. And, these guys become legends in the regiment, and they're household names throughout Australia. People know who Cameron Beard is. People know who Brett Wood is, Yeah. Unfortunately, they become world famous and famous throughout Australia because they made the ultimate sacrifice. But, it is part of what happens, mate, unfortunately. I'm just lucky that I got to come home every time. So, be unscathed. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And so, after 25 years of service, you were medically discharged from the Army in 2014, and 17 of those years in the Commandos. How difficult was it for you to transition from military life to civilian life, and did you have much support around you when you were medically discharged?
Yeah, that's a good question, mate, because there's a lot of things that I'm lucky, mate, because I was part of the command, and our priority was helping our guys, and I know talking to other guys from other units outside of the command, they didn't necessarily have that sort of support. The other thing behind it, which a lot of people don't realise, that when I medically discharged, I had a lot of injuries. The heart attack in 2008 really affected me in the long run, and there's other things that happened to me and so forth. And, I realised that, I can't keep doing what I'm doing, because like I said to you, it's harder to keep your beret than earn it. So if you're not performing, and I knew that I was coming to the end of my career, I just couldn't keep up with doing it anymore. I was physically injured. My heart wasn't as good as what it should have been. I had some, mental issues happening with myself, and all these different things happening. And I was lucky when I was a young soldier that my platoon sergeant was a bloke we called him No Neck Nolan, because he had no neck. He just had a head that sat on a set of shoulders, right? He was a mad rugby player. And back then, the MSBS scheme came into effect. And when I joined, I was on the old pension system, which is called Defence Force Retirement and Death Benefit. And our platoon sergeant just turns around to us and said, if you're going to do 20 years, do not change to MSBS, because the government is not bringing you in something to benefit you. They never do. And the DFIDB thing was a pension that I had for life if I did 20 years. Now, MSBS, for those guys who don't get medically discharged, you don't get anything until retirement age, right? So I thought to myself, I'm always going to do 20 years. I was going to be a lifer, mate. I was going to be, I had young visions as a young soldier. I'm going to be the RSM of the Army, this sort of shit, and I was going to, become the RSM of 2nd Commando Regiment, all this sort of stuff. But I got to a point, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be that guy in the regiment that, he's not pulling his weight. And that's mentally, that wasn't good for me. So, and I took my platoon sergeant's advice at the time, and I'm like, I'm not changing over. I'm going to stay on my DFODB pension. And when I retired, I got a pension for the rest of my life, and I because I medically discharged as well. I've got my DVA payments, and that was really significant for me because I realised that that I could be taken care of. I had an awesome DVA advocate that was working for our unit, a lady called Christy, and she was brilliant. Like, I had nothing to do with DVA, mate. I didn't even understand how the system worked, and she put me all through everything that needed to happen. And the regiment was great, mate, because once they realise that it's time for you to go, they will give you everything they need you to do to get to where you need to. And they just leave you alone because they know that your time has come to an end and they just want you to transition the best possible way you can. So when I retired, getting out was a huge thing for me. It was like, this is all I know. I've done this since I was 17 years old, and now I'm 42 and I'm like, shit, there's like people in the unit knew who I was. And when you step out of the system, you lose everything, mate. You lose your identity, you lose who you are. I'm not talking about everybody, but most of us do, especially guys who've done it a long time. We don't know who we are. We are institutionalized, for a better term. We know the system backwards and we know what we've done and what we haven't done. And to transition to the civilian world after a long period of time is really hard. And a lot of guys struggle with it. And, I was lucky that I had a really good support system around me, talking to the right people and talking about issues that I had and realising, my kids grew up, I've got 3 sons, and my kids grew up with me in the army. That's all they knew. Dad going away, Dad doing this, Dad doing that. And all of a sudden, Dad's home. And my youngest son, who's turning 17 this year, he's like, that's all he knew, and now Dad's home to spend more time with him because I retired, and it was like dabbling in other projects and so forth, but at the beginning it was really hard, mate. It took me a long time to realise who I am again, like that. Nick Hill, the commando, is who I used to be. Like, we have a saying in the Commando Association, you're a commando for life, and you are. You will always be one. You're never X, you will always be a commando. Just, you're not picking up a gun to fight battles anymore. But you're always part of that system and always part of that brotherhood and that creed, and there's things that people understand about you and you understand about them. So that support network is really, really good. And it's something that we fought a long time for guys getting out to understand, this system is here to support you as much as we can, outside of the system. Because unfortunately, some of the biggest things that happen, mate, is Army, and defence, in my personal opinion, sometimes cut you away like a dirty nappy because they're fighting wars and they're doing what they have to do. And sometimes, not all cases, sometimes, some people take it really hard the way that the Army and Defence transitions them out. I was lucky. I had the support to do it. I had some great people around me, and the regiment gave me all the support I needed. Everything I needed, they gave it to us. And the things they're doing for them now, like the Royal Commission and that sort of stuff, which we'll talk about later, is made things change and be more supportive, compared to what the Vietnam veterans had and the World War II and World War I guys had, So the transition period was hard at the beginning, but now, I look at it, it's been, 7 years since I got out, mate. It's like, holy shit, where'd 7 years go? So, and in that 7 years, I've been back to the regiment once because the regiment still fights wars and it's got a high tempo. Guys come and go, So, yeah, it's good.
It's something you touch on when you first left, and a lot of veterans that I've spoken to on the podcast say the same thing. They lose their sense of purpose and they find it hard to adjust to, like you said, adjust to civilian life because they, for people who've been in 30 years, or it's all they know. It's the regiment. It's they know the and most veterans I talk to, they say the same thing. We've lost our sense of purpose, and especially some veterans who have been medically discharged and who don't, like you, they said, when I signed up, I signed for life. I was not I wasn't, it was never part of my plan to be medically discharged. I was here to retirement age. And some of the veterans I still talk to now, and I've become really good friends with them, they're still struggling. They are still struggling to this day.
Yeah, and there are plenty of guys who do struggle, mate, and, I still talk to guys who are out of the regiment, who have difficulties all the time, and we talk about different things. And the biggest thing that I learned was just to talk to people about things. Don't bottle it up, like you mentioned before. Your own personal experience, and that's the best thing that's ever happened to me was talking to people about experiences and talking to the right people. The days of drinking, getting on the drink with my mates, wallowing in our, what's happened to us in the past, and guys we've lost. I don't do that anymore. Most of us don't. We have our times where, it's, an anniversary of one of the boys' deaths or whatever, and we do our thing. And my psychiatrist said to me once, he goes, "Can you change anything the day that these guys were killed?" I said, "No." And he said to me, he goes, "So what are you worried about?" I'm like, and the light just clicked on. I said, "I can't change a single thing." And he said, "Have a drink on their anniversaries." He says, "But get on with life, mate, because there's nothing you can do to change it." And that's how I see it now, and I, boys' memories and anniversaries, things like I do that, but I've got to live my life, mate. You can't keep, living in the past. You've got to look for the future.
It's a really blunt way to say it, but but it's so true. Like, yeah, you grieve for the loss of your mates, and we all grieve for loss of family and mates, but you have to pick up the pieces, and you have to put one foot in front of the other, and you have to get on with life. As tragic as it is with losing family and friends, there's times where we do need to pick up the pieces and go, all right, we've now got to, as tragic as it is, this is life. It's part of life. People die all the time.
And like I said to you, mate, it's part of what we did. We all knew the risks, and for example, my company was responsible for the bearer parties for the three guys that were killed, Ben, Chuck, Tim, and Scotty Palmer, that were killed in the helicopter crash in 2010. So my company did a lot of their funerals as the bearer party, and I was the bearer party commander for most of the funerals and so forth. And they were sad days, mate. They were horrific days, and we the Army is really good with getting on with life, because at a funeral everything's done at a slow pace, slow march and so forth. But once the boy has been, the guy, whoever it may be, is put in the ground, or he's going to be cremated, the bearer party marches off, because it's symbolising moving on. And unfortunately, soldiers take it literally. It takes some guys a long time to get over things, and I get it, and I appreciate that. But when you're in that system, you've got to get on with what's happening. And I understand why guys have such a difficult time when they transition, because they've got nothing to keep them going now, because their mind is back on to what's happened, not moving forward by, fighting more wars or training or deploying or whatever the case may be. And I understand why they have such a hard time when they come out. And I think it's so important that guys engage with their brothers they served with, and talk to the professionals they need to talk to, and so forth. And I talk about my own experiences, mate, and it did me a hell of a world of good, just being able to talk about things, and people, oh, you big bad commandos and this, that, and the other, and blah blah blah. Man, that affects the shit out of us, that stuff that we do, and losing mates. I was there for every single one of our guys, putting them in the ground. Every one.
And that takes a toll, mate. That that's not just, you're not human if that doesn't take a toll. Like, that does take a toll. And when you mention losing mates, when I had a similar moment myself when we lost two fellow firefighters that killed when the tree fell onto their truck, and it hit home for us because it made me stop and think of the risks that we, as first responders, that we take. And it does make you reassess. Like, it makes you, like, it stops you in your tracks. And I'll say it, Nick, it affected me. The two blokes getting killed, really, it did affect me a lot. And it made me actually stop, because during that time, we were halfway through a season that was a season from hell. And it was, it does rock you to your core, and you go, oh shit, if that can happen to them, it can happen to me too. Like, it's, we're not invincible. And like you said, it does. It makes you take stock of your life. And yeah, it was a real pivotal moment for me, is when those two boys were killed as well. And, they were going out and simply doing a job protecting the community. And yeah, it really affected me as well.
Yeah. I mean, I just wish, more guys would realise that there is a lot more out there to support you than what they think it is. And I understand how the regiment works, and I know how my unit works. It is, don't talk about it, you get on with it. And, and I think things are changing internally within it, which is great. But, for a long, long time, mate, that's like, you don't talk about it, you get on with it, you have a beer, and it's like, you have to deal with it the way you have to deal with it. And then some guys just can't deal with things, and they, like I said to you before, mate, none of us had a misconception of what could happen. What we knew, this can happen to you. We do a very dangerous job. Several times on team, I was nearly shot several times. That's how serious our training was. And obviously deploying on operations, you're getting shot out all the time. And, but that was a different thing. But you understood the risk that you're taking. So no, I don't think any of us, from the guys that I work with and served with, had an issue with what we were doing and the risk that we took, because it's something that we always understood. But we had an awesome support program around us to deal with that sort of stuff. And I know Big Army didn't necessarily always have that. Talking to guys from other units who were deployed at the same time as us, didn't always have the same support systems and mechanisms around them. So I think I'm just, grateful and glad that I had the support network we needed, and I had, and still have.
Yeah, and mate, it's great that you're still getting that support today. It's fantastic to see. And so, what are some of the projects and roles that you've been involved in since you've left the Army?
So one of the jobs that I did when I was still in the Army and was, in my just before my transition time to get out, I had a lot of work to do with the introduction of the MRH 90 helicopter, the Taipan, coming into service. And a lot of the stuff I did with that aircraft was the SF role that would have, and fast roping and doing the cable ladder extractions and so forth. And so I had a lot to do with that. So when I retired, it took me about 2 years to get into the mindset to try and do something different. So a good friend of mine that I was with a project with Airbus helicopters rang me up one day and said, "Are you interested in coming and do some work for us?" And I said, "Yep, sure." So I did some contract work with Airbus helicopters on the introduction of the MRH 90 for SF, and also wrote a lot of scenarios for the introduction of a light special operations capable helicopter, which was a helicopter called the H145 Mike, which was made by Airbus Helicopters, which is an actual brilliant piece of aircraft. And because Army was looking at replacing the Kiowa with a small light utility helicopter, but we had nothing that was suitable for special operations like the Little Bird, like the US 160th has, and so forth. So the project was about, trying to introduce Army into buying this aircraft and for special operations. And that was awesome. I love that project. We wrote scenarios because a lot of my time in Afghan, I spent planning our helicopter operations, which is the majority of things we did. So, understanding about weight loads and altitude and temperatures and, maximum flight times and all that sort of shit, all that planning stuff, I had a really good idea about, because I spent a lot of the time in Afghan doing it. So I spent, probably about 3 months doing that sort of project. I did a bit of time helping another mate of mine at the time running the ISET training for Army for the battalions deploying to Afghan for the embassy, or not embassy work, but, providing, PSD for a better term for guys deploying to Afghan. So we were teaching PSD drills to the guys who were deploying because that's the role they were doing. Guardian Angel, as the Army created the term. So we're teaching them, driving techniques and shooting and PSD drills and things like that. And I did that for a while. And yeah, that was pretty much what I dabbled into. And then I sort of got to the point where, I ran my own training and consultancy company. And I sort of just realised that, when I want to work, I will. And if I don't, I don't, and the last project I did was for Big Army again at the end of last year, which was just providing advice to guys doing urban operation stuff, which was my bread and butter when I was in the regiment. That's the thing that I did. And, I absolutely love that sort of stuff. So that's what I was sort of delving in and out of when I got out.
And you got involved with the Commando, the magazine, and what's that, Nick? And what do you still involved with that now, or is it something that you're no longer involved with?
So when I was getting out, the Australian Commando Association had gone through quite a few iterations of changes, because originally it started as the independent companies during World War II, after World War II and so forth. And then when the 1 and 2 Commando Company were raised, they started their own associations, and the 1st Commando Regiment started its association, blah, blah, blah. And then 4 Commando had its own association. And then, when the regiment changed names, all the Commando associations in Australia sort of amalgamated and created a Australian Commando Association. And each state has their own sort of sub-branch, so to speak, but its own independent association of itself. But, we have a national structure. So when I got out, I moved to Queensland not long after I got out, and I got involved with the Commando Association in Queensland. And I was one of the first full-timers to join it, because the majority of the guys were reservists from the 1 Commando Regiment days. And so, eventually I became the president of the association up there, and a lot of the younger guys from my era started to join and become involved in it. And basically we're just a support network for commandos, and we keep the traditions alive of the World War II guys. So we have a lot of ceremonial things that we do every year, memorial services for the World War II guys. There's not many of them left now. So that's pretty much what we were doing, and providing support to each other. And we were putting on, support for guys to go back to Timor. We were running a program called Commando's Return to Timor. We'd do that every year. We'd send 20 guys back to Timor, or guys to Timor, with Veterans Care, which is a veteran-run organisation by a son and a dad, Gary and Michael Stone, who are brilliant blokes. They do a great program to go to Timor, and it helps guys. The whole idea of it was to help them mentally, trying to go through and work through the processes of, so a lot of us who went to Timor back in the early days had never been back since. When I went to Timor, it had been 15 years since I deployed till I first went back. 15 years. And it was like how different the country had become, and enabled me to put some of my demons aside and, and be part of a program. So that's part of what we're trying to do for guys, trying to help them along the way and get them back on their track. And then a guy called Barry Grant, who was the president of the New South Wales Commando Association. He was the editor of what was called Commando News back then, which was the newsletter and the magazine we had. He wanted to stop doing it. He was dealing with some health issues. So I said, I'll take it up. So I did. And became the editor of the magazine. And then a couple of years ago, we changed it from Commando News to Commando, which is what we are. And yeah, I was the editor for probably about 3 years, I suppose. And in that 3 years, we'd put out a magazine quarterly about telling, stories about, the old boys, about what they did and other commando units around the world with similar roles and responsibilities, and talk about our recent operations, mainly in Afghanistan and other places that, we'd have guys talking about. So there's, missions that guys are doing in Afghan that nobody knew really a lot about, that we wrote about and told, explained what was happening and why we did certain things. And and then so the July issue this year was the last one I did as the editor. It's got other priorities now, mate. I'm still part of the association, still a member. My editorial days are done. I enjoyed it. I had a great time. It was good fun putting all the articles together, and a little bit brain bashing sometimes, trying to get people to reply to things and put articles forward, because that's how people are. I get it. I was like that when I was a president too. I was too busy doing other things. And but yeah, it was, absolutely loved it and had a really good time. It gave me a lot to do. And like I said, I enjoyed putting the articles together and doing the research on things. And I wrote a couple of articles personally for it and about one of our missions to Afghan, and one of the, biggest missions we ever did in the early days there that another company did. And, just writing about those sort of things and getting it out there that, there's a lot of things that are actually happening that our guys are doing that people, obviously don't know anything about, but without breaking security requirements and, secret acts and all that sort of stuff, we started talking about, some of the things that we had done and getting the older guys to talk about some of their stuff, especially in the 1 or 2 company days, like, Ray Simpson was a member of one commando company when he won his Victoria Cross in Vietnam. And a lot of people don't actually know that. Like, yeah, look at his badge he's wearing on his beret. Yeah, he was, the badge he wore the day he was presenting his VC was the One Commando Regiment badge. Or he was one company, so the now One Commando Regiment badge. But yeah, he was a commando, and that was his second time he was posted to commandos. And a lot of people don't know that. Yeah, he was a commando when he won his beret, won his medal. So he was attached to the training team, but that's what he was. So yeah.
It's, and it's like that for me, Nick, with like getting veterans like yourself and talking to the historians. I love doing it. Like, I love doing the podcast. I love, and I can see why you'd love doing, the editorial stuff, getting, catching up with guys and getting their stories. And it's important. And as we mentioned earlier, for future generations, these stories need to be told, and that, they do. They need to be told, and kids can learn from them and learn from experience. And I think it's vital work that, and like you said, with the World War II guys, it's more so important because we're losing them at an alarming rate. Like, I had the privilege to, just going off topic a little bit, I had the privilege to, earlier on this year, to interview a 95-year-old World War II veteran, and he served in Bougainville. And mate, it was fantastic. Like, and sitting down with him, he's like, it was like he was 70. Like, his memory was amazing, and just, he can remember what he did, and I caught up with him just before COVID, and he goes, "Don't worry, mate." He said, "I'm determined to get to 100. He said, "I will be here for another 5 years." And he said, "When we can, we'll catch back up and have a cup of tea." And that was just him. That's that, and it was awesome. Like, it was just by chance that I happened to meet him through a friend of mine who was a Vietnam veteran, and I just said, "Look, I'd love to get a World War II veteran on the podcast," and that's how it happened. And it's and I love doing it. I love doing these podcasts because it's, for me, it's been, for my part of my mental health and what I struggled with, it's really helped me. It's really, really helped me.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I mean, I was lucky enough to talk to a lot of the old boys from World War II, about their experiences as a World War II commando and talking about their thing. And we used to have a guy, he passed, just recently, unfortunately, a bloke called Harry Dinger Bell. He was in the 2nd Ninth Commando Squadron during World War II. And he would write an article every edition, because it was his letters that he was writing home to his family, so he would add these articles, and it was just really interesting the way language he used and so forth. As the editor, I had to change certain things a certain way, but it was really good to read these things. And then we had another guy who was a coast watcher in M Special, and he would write articles about his time with M Special and so forth. And we had Z Special guys in the association and all the independent companies as well. It was really good talking to them about the things that they were doing. And I was lucky enough when I joined the Commando Association in Queensland, one of our members was the guy who wrote the book about the 2nd 8th Commando Squadron in World War II. He was one of the officers. He was a captain in the company, and he wrote a book about that time. And he was still a member of our association in Queensland, and just listening to him talk about his stories, that what he did and what they were involved in. And the 2nd 8th was, a lot of people don't know, they were the ones who did the most consecutive combat operations throughout World War II. Like from the day they deployed to the end of the war, they were on combat operations. The longest company the company that spent the most time on combat operations. Just listen to what they were doing. It's like, holy dooly, mate. He's going, we spent 18 months straight fighting. Not every day, but deployed out doing their thing, I'm just like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. Absolutely. And so we mentioned earlier on in the podcast, and earlier this year, the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide was announced. What thoughts do you have about this, and do you think it will make a difference in identifying what needs to be done to prevent more suicides?
To be honest with you, mate, I hope it does. I have my own. I'm a bit of a pessimist at times and a realist. A lot of things that governments do don't generally, because if they bring them out in a bad light, they don't want people to see what happens. And I'm not saying that that's what they're going to do. Veteran suicide is a big thing. It's been around a hell of a long time. And I think social media has absolutely brought it to the forefront today, and some of my best friends have killed themselves because of their service and issues that are happening. So I hope it does make a difference, mate. I really do. I hope it makes certain organisations a little bit more accountable for what they do and how they interact with the veteran community. I hope that that the guys who are in the system now, or those getting out, get the support that they actually do need. But I'm not going to hold my breath on it, because it's been something that's been swept up under the carpet for a long, long time. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. And I hope good things fall out of this. I think that the best thing at this point in time, I mean, the system is what it is. I hope Army realises, or Defence realises, that they have a huge role in what happens with guys' mental well-being. I'll give you an example. So I have a massive personal problem with this. I can't stand how the Army will happily send soldiers away to go and kill another human being, but will not let them drink alcohol and treat them like men. Now, men and women drink alcohol to help soothe some issues. Now, I'm not saying that is the solution, but when you want people to go away and do adult things, sometimes they need to be able to release their issues, okay? Now, whether they do that by drinking or talking to their mates or whatever the case may be, but if you're willing to allow a man to go away and kill another human being, for God's sake, let him have a beer at the end of it so he can work it out in his own mind. And that, to me, is one of the biggest problems Defence has, because they're too worried about, appeasing other people. What about your own dudes? How they deal with things. So World War One, World War Two, Korea guys, Vietnam guys all had a beer at the end of when they came back from their operations to unwind and do their thing. When I joined the army, you had a big piss up at the end of the exercises in the first days of our deployments. But as soon as we started going to certain areas in the world, cut it all away on us. Like, why? And guys and women can't adjust in those environments. You know, taking a human life is a big thing. And a lot of these armed generals have got no idea about it. And they just make these policies out of something they know nothing about. So I hope they actually understand the issues they create with their policies that they make. Now, some will, some won't, some don't care. But I hope things really do improve out of it. I'm not, like I said, I don't hold my breath on it. And right now, it doesn't really affect me. So it's not in my forefront of thought process because it made a big splash. You know, it's like all the Afghan investigations and the reports. It's like, whatever. You know, it's just, anyway, that's another story. That's another podcast.
So, recent events happened in Afghanistan with the Taliban now back in power, and it must have been confronting for you and so many other veterans. And did it make you question, was it worth it when you went over and with your service in Afghanistan?
Not at all. No. Afghan, in my opinion, was always there to fail because we weren't allowed to fight a war the way we should have been fighting a war. You know, with politics gets involved with wars all the time. Unless you have unconditional warfare like the First and Second World Wars, you are not going to win them because the Taliban knew that eventually one day we're going to leave. You know, they're not stupid. All they have to do is sit and wait. That's all they did. They were running shadow governments the whole time we were there, mate. In every province and every city in Afghanistan, they were running shadow governments. They had their own governors, they had their own police, they had everything in place, mate, just waiting for us to go. You know, and sometimes they took the battle to us and they gave us good hounding at times, but we certainly gave it back to them. And I personally have absolutely no issues of what happened in Afghanistan, you know, because we knew we were going there. Personally, I was going there to help rid the world of some bad people. Now, if we helped the Afghani people along the way, awesome. Majority of the Afghani people had no idea what was going on around them, mate, to be quite honest. You know, I remember flying into some places in Afghan with the DEA, and we're flying in Russian-made Mi-17 helicopters with the Huey gunships in support, getting off in these back countries of Afghanistan's, and people thought we were Russians because we were flying in Russian helicopters. You know, they didn't even know the war was happening. You know, so most of them didn't really care, mate. And, you know, I personally went to Afghan to get rid of some bad people in the world. And if we help the Afghanis along the way, awesome. But I can also tell you, mate, I saw the corruption firsthand. So what happened in Afghanistan does not surprise me one bit. Does not one bit, mate. Because there's a lot of things that happen over there that the Afghanis wouldn't do unless we were there. So, no. I mean, I can't talk for everybody. And I know some people it probably hurt them pretty badly, you know, and I understand some families might have some questions that need to be answered by people. But I think personally, and the majority of us, especially us guys, you know, we went there to do a job, and that was what our job was. So you could see it coming, mate. You know, you can't fight wars with one arm tied behind your back and not expect to win it because it doesn't happen. It hasn't happened since World War II, mate. So
no, you're right, mate. And a lot of the veteran friends that I've spoken to said the same thing as you. They knew it was inevitable. They knew it was going to happen. And it's like they said, it's very similar to Vietnam. What happened in Vietnam? Same thing. Same, you know, it's like you said, the Second World War was really the last time we actually defeated an enemy on the battlefield. And you know, like, yeah, it's I can understand why some veterans are questioning why they went, but mate, I know majority that I'm friends with say, no, we know our purpose, we know why we went, and we completed our mission. That was what we were there to do. We did our mission and we came home.
And it's the same with Vietnam vets I've spoken to. It's a similar thing that they went there and did their job, and they did the job really well, and they're very proud of what they did, and they did their country proud. It was just something that politics at the time, so forth. One Vietnam vet that I knew very well, he just said, we fought the same wars, mate, but one was in the jungle and one was in the desert. Same scenarios, same things happening politically, blah 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 blah. And he's right, dead right. You like I said, mate, you can't fight a war with one arm tied behind your back when the enemy has no rules. So you're not expected to win it. And it is what it is sometimes, mate. And I don't any of the guys from my own experience who have killed, thought any different. We're there to do a job, So that's my personal.
Absolutely, and I think most veterans are the same. And I think, mate, as you hit the nail on the head when you said you went over there to get rid of some really, really crazy out there people and make the world a better place. And I said it to a veteran, Gary Mackay, actually spoke to him, and we had a really good chat about his time in Vietnam, and I said it to him when we were talking, and I said, no one wins a war. There's no winners in war. And he said, Adam, I'm glad you said that, because you're right. No one wins a war. There's always, war's a dirty business. It is a very, very dirty business. And, we've just got to remember people like you and other veterans who sign on the dotted line to protect our freedoms. And we're extremely grateful for those freedoms, mate. So thank you. I really do appreciate it. So lastly, you were talking to me and you told me you're writing a book and you're working on your book. When is that likely to be out, and where can we get a copy once it is out?
It's a book I've been working on since I got out, mate. So it's it's a very much a part-time project. It just basically talks about the career and experiences that I've had. There's a lot of myths about things that have happened over the years, and I've told a lot of people that I serve with, that I'm writing this book, and dudes are like raising their eyebrows, like, really? I'm like, yeah, don't worry. There's nothing in there that's going to, there's no secrecy breaches or anything like that. I'm just talking about things that I've experienced, it's from my point of view on things. And I always said to them, if your call sign appears in the book, that means I have a lot of time for you. But if your name appears, it means you're a dickhead, So, and they're like, what is mine? Is my name in it? I'm like, no, mate, it's not. So it's a story it's a book about my experiences with being a modern day commando. It talks about, the early days, but it's focused mainly around, creating the unit that we creating the tag, deploying it overseas, and the little things that have happened, the myths and, the rivalries between SAS and us, and some of the truth about some of those rivalries and things that have actually happened and that people get, misconstrued about. And a classic example is when there's bad reporting comes out of Afghanistan, they name units, but when it's a good job, they call it the Special Operations Task Group. And that's bullshit, because I know exactly who did what. You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's a lot of things that happen over the years that, I'm not trying to make people accountable for things, but I want to tell the truth about them and about what actually did happen, and tell a funny story. Talk about guys like Cam and Brett and Gotchi and all those guys that pay the ultimate sacrifice for us, and tell who they actually are. And, because people write books about people that they actually personally don't know them, and the not saying what they wrote was right or wrong. I'm not saying that at all. I've just read some books recently that I was part of certain things. I'm like, that didn't happen. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not how I remember it, But, people see things in combat a certain way, mate, because of where they're standing and what happens around it. But, that's basically what it's about. I don't have a publisher. It's just something I've been working on for a long time. I might not even release it, mate. I don't know. It's mainly, I started writing it to help my kids understand why I was away so much and doing what I did, and why I don't necessarily talk about things. So there's things that I won't talk to my kids about, but I'll talk to my brother-in-law about, or I'll talk to my extended family, but I won't necessarily talk to my kids about. So maybe, in some aspects, it's a book that just to help my kids and family understand some of the things that we were doing. And, like I said, I'm not talking about secrets or anything like that, but, some articles that I've written, for some chapters I've actually written that appeared in the Commando magazine as well. And so it's given them a bit more of an insight of what's happened and, realities of what goes on, and from my perspective of things, and compared to what we were doing in the early days of creating the Commando capability, full-time capability, to what's happening with the boys now in the regiment. They're almost polar apart, mate, because it's just, technology's changed, the way we do things change, and all these sorts of things. So it's just that's mainly what it's about, mate. It's just to sort of share some experiences and tell a few truths about certain things, and, get a different perspective on things,
Well, mate, if you ever do publish it, mate, I will definitely, absolutely be getting a copy, mate. Mate, I've really appreciated you coming on and talking with me, and it's been an honour and a privilege to have you on. And just lastly, what are you involved in now? What are you doing with yourself now?
So now, I was lucky enough to jump on the Brexit deal. My partner at the time is a Brit, so we packed our bags and moved to France, bought a B&B, and I run an Airbnb for veterans from all over the world, and they come and stay in a little tiny town in France, and get to unwind and do what they want to do. And that's what I do now, mate. And it's COVID hasn't helped the situation, but I'm living a really good retired life now. And, if I can help veterans from all over the world, doesn't matter where you come from, or first responders for that fact, and you need some time to chill out and unwind and go somewhere different in the world, that's what we're here for, and COVID hasn't helped, obviously, but, in Europe, mate, you can travel anywhere. No one stops you from going anywhere, mate, Just sometimes you have to wear a mask and show a COVID passport, an app to say that I've been vaccinated, to sit in a restaurant. And all those people who are worried about that shit, if you're in the army, the amount of stuff they've injected into us over the years, and you're worried about this. So, I can't even come home to Australia. I'm an Australian citizen. I can't come home because of government policies. That's another story. But, it's, if people want to get away and experience something different, and I don't live far from the Western battlefields and a lot of ancient battlefields and World War II battlefields and so forth. So, it's that's what I do, mate. I want to give something back to veterans and give them an opportunity to experience something different, because I know how much it helped me.
When the borders open, I look forward to coming over and having a beer with you, and and the beer always tastes better in Belgium. So I've had
like Belgium.
No, mate, I look forward to coming over and having a beer with you. And as I said, I miss the battlefields, and I really cannot wait to get back over there. And hopefully it'll be next year. And mate, we can have a beer together, and and catch up. And as I said, I really do appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your story. It's one of inspiration, mate, and I truly say it, never die, never say die, and just real grit and determination. As you said, the two biggest things you ever did was put your hand up to volunteer for the Army, and then put your hand up to volunteer for the Commandos. And I think if people take anything away, it's that we can achieve anything that we set our minds to. Absolutely.
Absolutely, mate. I totally agree with you. I had a young guy that used to follow me on Instagram. He was always wanted to join the Army and so forth. And he said, "What's the biggest thing that helped you get through going to Commandos?" I said, "It's all here, mate. It's all in your head. You know, you don't have to be the toughest guy. You don't have to be the fittest guy. It all comes down to your mental toughness. And if you have mental toughness, you will do and achieve anything you want in your life.
It's
all up to you.
Absolutely. And mate, it's a saying I live by. It's how bad you really want it. How bad you really want it.
Yeah.
If you really want it, you'll do it. If you don't want it, it's, you know, if there's that 1 ounce of doubt, you won't do it. It comes down to how bad you really, really want it. And I am going to use a term here that, you know, it's of the SAS, but who dares wins. Who dares really wins.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's you know, our motto is without warning.
Yep.
You know, and it's like, you've got to do it. If you want to do it and achieve it, you've got to do it.
Yep.
You know, and just get it done.
Yep.
You know, don't stop talking about it.
Yep.
You know, like I talked about coming to Europe for years. And I said, fuck, I'm just going to do it.
Yep.
And bang.
And
you know, so
that's it, mate.
You've got to do it.
It's one of those things that you really do need to do. And since, you know, I've gone through my struggles, mate, now if I say I'm going to do something, I now do it. I just, you know, I'm not a gunner anymore. I am a doer now. Like, I absolutely just do it. And mate, it's really serving me well, you know. And there's things now that I'm doing that, you know, if you had said it to me 3 years ago, I would have said I can't do that. There's no way. But now, no, I've just got it's mindset. It is totally the mindset. And yeah, absolutely. So, Nick, thank you very much for coming on True Blue History, and thank you for your service, and thank you for everything that you are doing. And mate, as I said, I look forward to catching up when times allow us. So, Nick Hill, thank you very much, mate.
You're welcome, mate. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review for the podcast on whatever platform you get your podcasts. And if you feel like supporting us, you can now via our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/True Blue History, or buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/True Blue History, and check out our new website, truebluehistory.com, for more great content.